No, I'm just going to introduce you. I go off and take some gas.
They're probably an hour and a half.
But my
They're doing triple
commitment,
header.
I should be committed, I get to be here.
Well,
Probably
Is to answer any questions, no matter how embarrassing they are, and how big a lie I may have to tell to avoid the embarrassment.
You're a businessman, you know how to.
Oh, yeah. The question also was, two people asked me if I'm going to sing the theme song for 2000 meeting.
That is you originally.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to pay anybody.
You wrote it too, right?
Of course
You
I wrote
composed
it.
it, yes. You're everybody jealous.
Well, it wasn't, you consider that a talent or not. On some occasion, one of these, somebody gave me.
Yeah, that was a good idea.
oh, here we go. Still on. There you go.
Stop calling me hard. That was your
I thought it was just Japanese achievements.
Another one of your former coworkers.
Who's that?
That's right.
I saw these when I was like a kid in the drive-ins in Texas. They used to have these all-night horror film festivals. And viewers in the middle and make a hammer film and like blood feast. And what was that? You know,
That's what some people say.
it's,
I can try, because people say, who wrote this script for Blood Feast?
Works on Honeywell now.
My answer is,
We saw 2008. Yeah, it would be, yeah.
yeah, I'm gonna, we're not started yet.
He was Herschell Gordon Lewis. He's the guy who wrote.
I have this wonderful photo from the last time.
You really? They're pretty.
You'll see them.
I heard that West had a blood feast a few years ago.
We're
I got smashed up in a car accident last year. I think it was 10 years.
Look at me with this gas.
Yeah, he's the nicest
I
ever.
ran against the
Rock and Roll High School too. Yeah, yeah.
Rock and Roll High School.
on the tennis court.
$10 for an autograph?
And the result is that I haven't won a tennis game since.
She was so sweet.
I haven't won a racket in my hands. These things,
Oh Lord. I would say they
typical audience
you
reaction.
always remember. I mean, you always think like. Yeah,
I believe I act in these crazy movies.
This one is.
I believe you worked with an actress friend of mine. I don't think her voice.
Want a picture too? Sure.
You worked on your film up in Canada recently.
PJ Souls from Rock and Roll High School.
We've done
Ask me a question about that movie, will you?
Halloween.
Oh,
really?
Not released yet.
What's it? That's
I watched like 5 movies. But I watched twice now, I'm gonna ask you to ask me.
Okay. Why is it not
Rudy. Rudy. Oh yeah, Rudy Hoosiers, and then they come back to the Karate Kid again. Like, yeah.
All right, folks, we start in exactly 1.5 minutes.
All right. See, what's nice is we get the picture of her again.
Oh yeah.
Well, she's still, you know what?
I mean, well,
She's older, but has not changed. She's good. Yeah,
You know, she,
you know,
I didn't think
her eyes are all the same.
you see what I mean?
But I like that.
Thank you all for being
That's a
patient
really nice job.
and waiting. Thank you, sir, for being patient and waiting. Man who needs no introduction, Herschell Gordon Lewis.
You might have said deserves no introduction. So every word you choose strikes home to me. So I just pitch in with this thing, or what do we?
Do whatever you wish. The reason why we're all here, and one of the reasons why a lot of people here are Chiller, because of the movies you made. They're a signpost for our era. People grew up on them. Blood Trilogy, etc. Could I just start with one question, and then we can go from there?
Certainly.
What does it feel when people come up to you today and say, I love your film and it influenced my life, or made me become a filmmaker? I mean, what's your reaction to the people that come to you as fans?
My reaction, obviously, is that they are brain damaged. truly, as you struck home with that question, because Blood Feast was an accident of history. I've been lying in some bed in a hotel or somewhere, watching a movie in glorious black and white. I think Edward G. Robinson was in it, and he was a gangster, and they chased him and they pumped him full of bullet holes, and he died quietly with a little splotch here. I said, wait a minute, that ain't it. And that really was the genesis of Blood Feast, which is now accepted as the first splatter film. We never called them that. We just called them gory movies, so people would understand what we were doing. And what I am walking, what I can walk, proof of is, if you live long enough, you become legitimate. So there's hope for everybody. And the word isn't released. We didn't release movies, we excreted them. As some of you folks know, I started what I laughingly call my career as a school teacher. I taught English literature of the 19th century. That was my specialty. With poets like Browning and Tennyson and Coleridge. And look what I did. Skewed off in a different direction altogether. But once again, it's proof that if you can fill a niche that relates at all with what those people want to see or hear, there is room in this industry for us all. And I was reading in one of the trade papers a few weeks ago. I was telling that back to somebody today. Here's Disney, which is probably the most powerful company in the business today. And Disney had a movie called The Lone Ranger, starring Johnny Depp, who is as good a box office draw as you're going to find. Disney announced a $200 million write-down on that movie. Now, what went wrong? How is that possible? How do you lose $200 million on a movie? It's not easy. They managed. The trick really is to say to yourself, on what level do I regard this as an art form? On what level do I regard this as a business venture? We call it the movie business, but too many people in it, they don't make movies, they give birth. And if you attack their movie, you're attacking my child. Now, you will certainly, if you've had any kind of relationship with my checkered past in this business, you know how attacked we were when we first began excreting our movies. How dare they make a movie like this? Well, they're not even part of some major studio. Doggone right we weren't. Had we been, we would have made a movie that was probably less entertaining for more money with no point to it that anybody out there would understand. Instead, thank you, my friend, for that. Instead, what we began to do was to entertain people on a level in which they had never been entertained before. Now, I look in filmographies today, all these years later, I'm called the Godfather of Gore. Is that a compliment? In 3 words? I don't care. Any more than I care about lifetime achievement. Achieving what? Gee, again, I'm reminded of some of the successes we had in the teeth of attacks by critics and newspapers and who knows what else. How dare they do this? I remember when we opened Blood Feast in San Diego, and the newspaper there really tore into us to an extent in which it became an organized campaign. And they disclosed for some annoying reason how to get in touch with me. I had a partner at the time named Dave Friedman, a true genius in this business, who died 3 years ago. Terrible loss to the industry. But Dave and I were looking at the complaint letters that came in, and they had all been mailed within a 3-day period. And we knew it was an organized campaign because every one of these letters, every one of them referred to "You reckless men," and they spelled it W-R-E-C-K. An indication of the literacy level. But so what? I thought it was very funny. Dave didn't. He took him to the FBI, and thank goodness they thought it was funny too. Now, I'm not entirely sure what our structure is tonight, but a number of people probably who didn't show up here asked if I would sing the theme song from 2000 Maniacs. And I'll do that, but you're going to have to join in with a rebel yell, which is not that tough to memorize, as you'll see. The idea behind that originally was this. When we shot Blood Feast, it was purely experimental. I spent as little money as I possibly could on that movie.
Well, you played the instruments, right?
I played an instrument, not all. I played the kettle drum. Yeah, and the reason I played the kettle drum, that was the only instrument I couldn't hire a professional to do. I scored that picture. I've never worked so hard in my life. But the reason I scored the picture was because the estimates I was getting to score that picture were greater than the movie cost to make. Nonsensical. So I knew what I wanted. Weird sounds. I wanted a trombone, and I wanted a cello, and an organ for chords, and then the kettle drum, bong, 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 bong. How much talent does it take to do that? So I went down to a place called Frank's Drum Shop in Chicago, and I rented some kettle drums, and I played the kettle drum with no screen credit, of course. I played the kettle drum. And years later, when I was remarking on this, somebody else brought it up that I had played the kettle drums in Blood Feast. I said, "Did you know that Leopold Stokowski, who was the renowned conductor of the Philadelphia Orchestra, played no instrument? They qualified him for the Musicians Union on the kettle drums." And I could say, "Yep, my buddy Leo and I played the same instrument." So before this thing gets totally out of hand, will you join me in the theme song from 2000 Maniacs?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Now here's what we have to do. In the middle of each verse, or toward the end of it, is the rebel yell. The rebel yell is, "Yee-haw!" Let's try it once. Yee-haw! Oh, you're hired. Where were you when we shot this thing? All right, let's try it. I'll start it off. There's a story you should know from 100 years ago, and 100 years we waited now to tell. Now them Yankees come along, and they'll listen to this song, and they'll quake in fear to hear that rebel yell. Yeehaw! Oh, the South gonna rise again. Yeehaw! Oh, the South gonna rise again. Robert E. Lee broke his musket on his knee, and 1,000 pieces shattered on the ground. But he looked up then, and he gathered up his men, and from his lips there came an awful sound. Yeehaw! Oh, the South gonna rise again. Yeehaw! Oh, the South gonna rise again. Stonewall took a gun and he made the Yankees run, but he took a fatal bullet in the chest. As he fell down dead, old Stonewall said, "I'm giving you a dying man's request." Yeehaw! Oh, the South gonna rise again. Yeehaw! Oh, the South gonna rise again. One more. Jeb Stuart spurred his horse, and the Yankees ran, of course, but there wasn't any powder for his gun. So he said to his boys, "Let's make a lot of noise, and we'll charge again and make them Yankees run." Yeehaw! Oh, the South gonna rise again. Yeehaw! Oh, the South gonna rise again.
My name is, sorry to interrupt, my name is Jimmy Maslin, and I was such a fanatic of Herschell's films, I bought the rights to the Blood Trilogy in around 1979. And on behalf of Lisa Petrucci here, Cam and Clement from Chiller, we want to give you a plaque for commemorating the 50th anniversary of the Blood Trilogy.
It's because of Jimmy Maslin that these movies are still alive today. He made a move at a time when I think they were burned out nothing. And look what he did with them. And forever, Jim, I am in your debt. So all of us here in this room.
I also want to thank, Lisa too. Mike Trainer.
Petrucci and Mike Brady, whatever Jimmy did would have had no distribution. These guys are geniuses in that respect. Thank you, jeepers. I'm glad I came.
Hey guys, now before we start screening, we're going to do this old school. Now, back in the day, Herschel and Dave would show these movies, roadshow. You'd get a vomit bag because the movies were so, as Dave's wife would say, vomitous. So anyway, you all get a free one of these, and maybe either later or tomorrow have Herschel sign it, and it's a commemorative 50th anniversary one. So dig it.
You think I know how to sign my name? Jeepers, that unexpected, beyond description. Once we had made Blood Feast, what are we going to do with it? I was cutting this movie in my little cutting room in Chicago at the time, and people who wandered by would see this mess with loose pencil marks all over. Is this medical film? Not exactly. And so we decided we'd open a movie in Peoria, figuring if we died in Peoria, who would ever know? We cropped them in Peoria. And the entire motion picture industry was aghast. Because then, as now, Sunday night, you watch 60 minutes of a show like that. They break in with what the box office track has been of movies that opened that Friday. So 2 days later, you know whether a movie's going to be a bomb or a hit. Then it took a little longer, but there was no question when we drove down to Peoria to see what we were doing. Here was this island with cars on the highway. We figured it was an accident. That's terrible. We were the accident, and it wasn't that terrible. And that really was the genesis of 2000 Maniacs, where I said to Dave Friedman, what if we made a decent one? I'm not trying to denigrate my own product, but really point out to you that one way to make a movie is to say to yourself, I'm going to go as cheaply as I can. Another way of making a movie is to say, I'm going to go as expensively as I can, which is how people do cover their own egos. A third way to make a movie is to say, let's throw it against the wall and see what comes off, whether it sticks or whether it stinks. That, again, is a criterion that is not used often enough in our business. For Blood Feast, and I'll admit it now because it's all these years later, and really, it's like that line from Gone with the Wind. I don't give a damn, although I do. This is one of my children, and when someone says, which of your children do you love the most? And I say, the idiot. And they say, well, which of your children is that? And I have no answer. Blood Feast runs exactly 70 minutes because at that time, when double features were the core of drive-in theaters, to be first feature of the double feature, your movie had to be at least 70 minutes long. Blood Feast is 70 minutes long. In 35 millimeter film, that's 6,300 feet of film that makes 70 minutes. We only bought 8,000 feet of film. Well, two words you never heard on my set. Take two. But that wasn't a factor. because that wasn't why people came to see the movie. They didn't come to see it because Tom Cruise or Johnny Depp or Al Pacino or somebody was in it. They came to see, did you see that? And they didn't say, what a ragged pan, which is what critics look for. They say, hey, you know what they did? They pulled that tongue out of that. Well, there's another episode. Is anybody here related in any way with a woman named Astrid Olsen? Okay, then I can tell the story. Dave was our talent guide. I like to make movies. He liked to, I'm in the movie business. But that was part of his charm. As Jimmy and Lisa will agree, there was only one of him. And he's sorely missed because of an element of showmanship that he added to the industry, which apparently it may not be gone forever, but it's certainly an eclipse right now. So there's a scene in Blood Feast in which the lunatic reaches into the girl's mouth and pulls out her tongue. And that was the famous tongue scene. Now the infamous tongue scene, there's never been anything that quite matches it. And even today, all these years later, I will see a review of some movie of this type which compares the effect in it to the tongue scene in Blood Feast, which couldn't have been more primitive. We went to Tampa because in Miami, where we shot that, there's no packing house. And I didn't want the tongue they sell in a supermarket. So we needed all that glop that's out behind it. And that was our tongue. And all we needed was a girl who could put that in her mouth along with her own. Dave found a girl. Her name was Astrid Olsen. And he found her at the Miami Playboy Club. So that was her whole part. You got her tongue pulled out. If we make a remake of Blood Feast and you want the part, you may have it. So we shot it in a room in the Suez Motel in Miami Beach. Never would we shoot in a studio. Why waste that kind of money? Here's a hotel room. Astrid Olsen showed up for her part with her boyfriend. One of these plug uglies with tattoos all over him and a headband and the hair falling down over his knees. And he didn't know what was going on except that his girlfriend was going to be in a movie. And yeah, here we are with that big Mitchell camera, which commanded respect. That's before Panavision. But at the time, it looked like a movie. It was a movie camera in 35mm color. So we're getting ready for this scene because she did not know what we were doing quite. And I said to her, Miss Olsen, this man may get a little rough with you. She said, oh, like a man who is rough. At that point, I figured her boyfriend's going to strangle all of us. So we shot the scene where he pulled the tongue out neatly, and as tongues will do when they're not attached, it came out. And then her boyfriend says, what's her next shot? We'll call you. We paid her and got a release, and that, of course, may have been the end of her show business career. There are others who were in my movies that I felt were not masters of the thespian arts. Again, I could name a few. But there's no point insulting more people than I have to. Usually the insults were coming in other directions. But as I said to you, if you live long enough, you become legitimate. As witness where we are tonight. We have lived long enough, and all of us become legitimate because we are here not celebrating, but looking at a product which at the time it was produced would have caused, if nothing else, embarrassment. At the very worst, probably a divorce or two. The three movies they're looking at tonight are called the Blood Trilogy because those were the three movies in which Dave Freeman and I were partners. On the third movie, which was Color Me Blood Red, which followed 2000 Maniacs, and as you know, by the way, regarding 2000 Maniacs, to this day, all these years later, and all these movies later, that movie is still my personal favorite of all the ones I've made. about a small southern town that gets even with the Civil War. I'm not sure why I feel that way about it, but I am sure that I feel that way about it. Now, Color Me Blood Red was a different story altogether, about a mad painter who, to get the proper shade of red in his paintings, has to use human blood. No, he doesn't. He could use chickens. But suppose in Color Me Blood Red, here's this mad painter who uses a chicken. Somehow or other, I don't think we would have had the notoriety we got from that picture. Those three pictures established the genre as such. Blood Feast alone, yes, no question, it has a position in motion picture history. I've made other movies over the years later on that really outgrossed Blood Feast, such as She-Devils on Wheels, which was again an accident of history. People saying, "Why are you always doing this to girls?" I said, "Okay, you want some bloody guys?" So we had She-Devils on Wheels. An interesting story about She-Devils on Wheels. And I know I'm wandering here, but we are sharing episodes and adventures. There's a scene in She-Devils on Wheels in which these girls swipe one of the guy's motorcycles and ride off with it. He in turn picks up a friend's motorbike and goes after them. They string a wire across the road neck high. He runs into the wire and just knocks his head off. Now by that time in the sequences, I was able to afford a cameraman. Until then, usually, I was the director and cameraman. Dave Friedman was the producer and sound man. On some of these movies, to get sync sound with a clapstick, the actors had to use their own clapstick, throw it aside, and start acting as fast as they could, because that's as far as the budget went. But with affluence comes crew. So we had a crew. Well, my cameraman on She-Devils on Wheels took his job very seriously. There's a mixed blessing there too. I like people who take their job seriously, as long as it doesn't wipe out every other facet of what they're supposed to do. To me, a cameraman who's looking at something is supposed to follow what he's looking at in the viewfinder. And that must follow, as Hamlet said, or the guy in Hamlet, as the night the day. Here comes this head. We had a student, an art student at the Miami University, make up this head, primarily out of mortician's wax. And the head came flying through the air. He's following it. He came at it, and he swung to the side. His head hit the ground, smacked the nose right off it. I was boiled. I said, "Give me that camera." So we put a fake nose back on as best we could. They threw it again. It came through the air and it hit me right in the crotch. With stage blood all over it. Now, it was not painful, except emotionally. I said, if I go back to the hotel like this, I'm going to get arrested. That was the night at that time of my big discovery. I was determined to get that stuff out. Now, we had tried it on actresses, and actresses were a disposable unit. We reached a point in which our stage blood, which would not wash out, was the last thing we'd shoot on the market back then. It was called Axion. I had tried chlorine, bleach, and everything you can think of on other elements. Didn't work. I was determined to get that stuff out of my pants. Put it in the eye. Oh my God! Think of the actresses I could have saved. In fact, I hung on to those pants for years, only because of their position in motion picture history. So you come across landmark elements. Over the years, as the industry itself evolved, we became aware that at some point we were going to have to carve a new niche. Because everybody suddenly I had the whole industry to myself for 5 or 6 years. I was grinding out these movies like so much hamburger. And nobody else was making them. But somebody said, hey, here's this guy with no budget and no actors and no talent, and look what he's doing in a theater, because he can go to a theater and say, look here, you put in this major company picture from MGM or Universal or somebody, and you're paying them 80% the first 2 weeks, 60% the next 2 weeks, then 50-50, and if you run over 6 weeks, we'll get down to 35%. I come in with my piece of crap, and I say, wait a minute here, hold it. Guarantee us 1 week at 35%. The theater owner will say, if he's got any brains, but some of them do, if I play to a half-empty house, I can make more money than I would playing to a full house where I'm giving 80% to Universal. And that was how we managed to get bookings in areas that normally wouldn't have booked a picture like ours. No, I never had any dream of opening at Radio City Music Hall. They weren't of that caliber. But what they were money makers within the industry. And that to me is a very good way to keep score. Well, anyway, we began to look at this stuff and say, what else can we add? And the answer was humor. If my new movie ever gets excreted, and that is Herschell Gordon Lewis's Blood Mania, it's called. And we shot it in Canada and Calgary, Alberta. And the reason we did, the producer of that movie said that the province of Alberta was putting up some of the production money. Can you imagine something like that happening when we shot Blood Feast? Oh my God. So there is some evolution or devolution. And I've got, if anybody here wants to produce a movie, talk to Jimmy or me. We can't start shooting really until tomorrow. We're ready to go as soon as we find a producer who wants to have in it, one, the guts that we have to keep making this stuff. And number two, a sense of humor. Because it's my opinion, we have run the gamut on the well, I've seen that before kind of attitude. When you look at a movie like Scream or something, didn't I always see that? Maybe you didn't see that individual sequence, but there is a sameness factor. Sooner or later you want to get away from it, especially with as many people who are making pictures today. My new movie was shot digitally. Why would I shoot it digitally after all these years of shooting in 35mm color film? Why would I do that? I had a 35mm camera I could load blindly. In fact, I can't even tell you how many times I would go in the trunk of a car with a changing bag and reload the magazines. So, what's happened to the industry? Nothing much, except we have digital. And we have CGI, which is computer-generated images. And anyone who is not flat out lying will agree, when you put digital against film, digital wins. And I've got evidence of that in the movie we just shot, which is with the same scene, shot digitally, shot in the same position, with the same type of lens, on 35 color film, with a contemporary camera, not some ancient Edison device. And side by side, or next one after the other, not on a TV monitor, but on a theater screen, there is no question whatever, in my opinion again, in the next 5 years, film will be obsolete for making films. Why? Because digital is, one, it's better, it's easier to handle, and in a sense, if you handle it right, it's cheaper. It's got everything going for it that film used to have. But you either accept the march of time or you fall victim to it. Okay, before I get out of here so you guys can look at some movies, does anybody have a question about what was, what is, or what might be? I've got you all stupefied. Yes, sir.
I have a very basic question for you. I'm really interested in knowing, when you first screened Blood Feast Did you sit in on a screening, and what was the audience's reaction? And did that get a rise out of you? Were people vomiting everywhere? I mean, you must have gotten a hell of a kick out of it.
Great question. If you didn't hear it, when we first opened Blood Feast, what was the reaction? Were people vomiting everywhere? Well, you get used to that too. Sometimes I'll just walk into a room and people will vomit everywhere. We really caught the industry unaware because nobody believed, probably including ourselves, we would do the business we did with a movie that, one, broke almost every rule. There was not one recognizable name in that movie. Number two, what? Did you see that? How ragged that pan was? People don't walk out of a movie because of a ragged pan. They walk out because they're bored, or they're insulted, or they want something they can yell and scream about. The reactions that we got were from critics were 130% unfavorable. Did that scare us? No, because at that time also there was a thing called the Legion of Decency. Well, that legion found us indecent. But here again was another problem, because there were regulations all over the place against nudity. There's no nudity in Blood Feast. There were regulations against torture. We didn't torture them, we just whacked them out. But there was no regulation at all against gore, of blood just gushing out in huge gouty, that's the word we used, gouts of blood. So the answer to your question in 10,000 words or more is yes, it was a universally negative comment. But here's something else we should be aware of because of the business and the type of business we're discussing. And that is what the critics have to say often will spur somebody's desire to see what seems to be forbidden rather than discourage it. And in areas such as San Diego, for example, in which we were torn to pieces by the critics, we did very, very well indeed. In Los Angeles, by the way, where the reviews were mixed, really, in some areas, the business was terrific. In other areas, where it was reviewed as a serious movie, it didn't do all that well. So I would add an element here too, which is showmanship. Again, a lost art in the world of motion pictures. And the reason it's a lost art is because, again, people's ego takes command over their desire to entertain. What we produce is entertainment for somebody. We want somebody to come out of a theater, and today it's more DVD than theater. There's a lot of major company product is going direct to DVD. How does that work? Tough stuff. It's especially tough for the independent who shows up with a camera about the size of the one you're using and a girlfriend, and we're going to make a movie. Well, God bless both of you, but that does a disservice, really, to whatever fragment of professionalism remains in the world of motion pictures. And that goes for major companies, too, who depend more on technique than on entertainment. Whatever you do, please, if you make a movie, or if you, where'd Jimmy go?
He's right there.
Oh, okay. If you make a deal with Jim to make a movie, think in terms of entertainment. That's what we sell, is entertainment. And that's why, in the teeth of a very, very peculiar release pattern, in which some movies that cost a terrific amount of money just don't do it at all. They don't survive. Why? Because they're not entertaining to anybody. Pick a group to whom you're going to make sure they can afford to buy the movie. Because oftentimes, too, we see movies that seem to be aimed at 14-year-olds. Now, does the movie rating system have any guts to it anymore? In my opinion, and my opinion is only my opinion, I am not quoting this as fact, but opinion. In my opinion, no. And the reason my answer is no is twofold. One, you can go and watch any late night newscast and see scenes we wouldn't have dare put in Blood Feast. That is really the sophistication that's overtaken us. But secondly, many parents don't take a paternal viewpoint of what their kids are going to see or be involved in. And we see that in the newspaper every day too. Why would some 15-year-old walk into a classroom and with a loaded gun? Where'd he get it? Off his father's shelf? What? The whole world is coming to a horrible end the way we're going at it. So I'm rather than editorialize, let's move. Does anybody else have
One more question. Actually, let's do one more because we have the 3 films we want to
Oh my
spoil.
goodness.
I'll let you choose.
Well, he's sitting here.
What I'd like you to talk about, when I was a kid, what really drew me to your films I loved, I thought the marketing was artistic and beautiful. The ads were provocative. Do you have any rule of thumb on how we're going to do the ad campaign?
Positively.
And who was in charge of that? You're a business, you taught business courses in a business textbook, right?
Yes.
The marketing was, what was your rule of it? You had
The
some-
rule of marketing for this, or I don't care what you're doing, whatever you're marketing. In fact, in some cases, we were shooting. They'd say, "What are you shooting?" I'd say, "An orange juice commercial." They wouldn't know. They would see blood spurting all over the place. And I said, "It's an orange juice commercial." So what it means is, yes, Barnum was right. There's a sucker born every minute. And you look at somebody who ordinarily would not respond. Oh, what the hell? They're not. Yes, they will. Because you're touching a nerve that hasn't been touched for 50 years. I'll take one other quickie. Yes.
The novelization of Blood Feast, did you write that?
Yes.
That was great. That was
Oh,
so.
got me scared for a minute when
The
you
humor
remember
in
what the
that.
second half of the question is. I've got to, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Did any local authorities ever raid any of the theaters playing your film?
Oh, sure.
And what was the result?
The result was we got our film back with an apology. That's one area in which I refused to say, okay, let him do it. There were places where before we would open a movie, they would say, don't play that here. We're warning you. We wouldn't play it there. There was no point starting a fight in advance because sooner or later they'll give way. They have to, especially if you have any control over the publicity. And I apologize for running this long, guys, but I certainly think you will enjoy the movies more than you enjoy my prattling. Hey, thank you for being here. I love you.